It was supposed to be a day of celebration, a rare opportunity for Amelia and her husband, Michael, to step away from their demanding schedules and indulge in a moment of luxury. The private jet, a masterpiece of engineering and design, stood waiting on the tarmac, its sleek body reflecting the golden rays of the setting sun. The scene was picture perfect, almost like a dream. Yet, as Amelia approached the aircraft, she had no idea that this seemingly perfect moment would turn into something unforgettable, not because of the flight, but because of what would happen before they even boarded. Amelia adjusted her designer bag on her shoulder and exchanged a glance with Michael, who offered her a reassuring smile. They were both dressed for the occasion, Amelia in an elegant outfit that exuded sophistication, and Michael in a tailored suit that hinted at his position of influence. To the casual observer, they looked like any other couple accustomed to the world of private aviation. But today, appearances would prove to be deceiving. As they approached the aircraft, a man stepped forward to greet them, or so they thought. The pilot, dressed in a crisp uniform with polished shoes and a hat tilted slightly to one side, had an air of authority that he seemed to wear like armor. His stance was rigid, his expression unreadable at first glance. But as Amelia got closer, she noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor, the faint flicker of something in his eyes. It wasn't warmth or professionalism, it was judgment. "Excuse me," the pilot said, his voice smooth but laced with a hint of condescension. His gaze flicked over Amelia briefly before settling on Michael. "Are you both sure you're in the right place? This jet is reserved for private clients." Amelia froze for a moment, unsure if she had misheard him. Michael's brow furrowed slightly, but he remained calm. "Yes," he replied simply. "We're quite sure." The pilot's lips curled into a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I see," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. He glanced at Amelia again, his gaze lingering for a second too long, as if searching for something to validate his assumptions. The moment was subtle but unmistakable, an unspoken message that Amelia wasn't accustomed to this level of luxury, that she didn't belong here. Amelia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had encountered this kind of behavior before, the type of quiet disdain that people try to mask behind polite words and professional facades. But it still stung. She exchanged a look with Michael, who gave her a small nod as if to say, "Let me handle this." "Is there a problem?" Michael asked, his voice steady and firm. The pilot hesitated for a moment, then shook his head. "No problem at all," he said, though the insincerity in his tone was impossible to miss. "It's just that we're expecting a high-profile client, and I wouldn't want any misunderstandings." Amelia's cheeks flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. She opened her mouth to respond but stopped herself, deciding it wasn't worth the effort. She knew people like this pilot all too well, quick to judge, slow to listen. Michael, however, wasn't about to let it slide. "Do you know who I am?" Michael asked, his tone carrying just enough edge to make the pilot pause. The pilot's smile faltered for a split second before returning, this time more forced. "I wasn't informed of any changes to the guest list," he said vaguely. "But if you'd like, I can double-check with the crew inside." "That won't be necessary," Michael said firmly. "We're expected. Now, if you'll excuse us, we'd like to board." The pilot stepped aside reluctantly, his expression betraying a mix of confusion and annoyance. As Amelia and Michael climbed the stairs to the jet, she couldn't shake the feeling that the pilot's gaze was still on her, heavy with unspoken doubts and assumptions. Inside the jet, the atmosphere was vastly different. The interior was a masterpiece of modern luxury, plush leather seats, polished wood accents, and soft lighting that created an ambience of warmth and exclusivity. Amelia took a deep breath, letting the elegance of the space calm her nerves. Michael placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't let him get to you," he said softly. "People like that aren't worth your energy." Amelia nodded, though the pilot's words lingered in her mind. She knew Michael was right, but she couldn't help feeling that moments like these were a reminder of how far society still had to go. It wasn't just about the assumptions people made, it was about the way those assumptions were expressed, the subtle ways they tried to make you feel small. As the couple settled into their seats, the pilot entered the cabin to perform a routine check. He didn't say a word to Amelia, but his silence spoke volumes. It was as if he had decided that ignoring her was the best way to assert his dominance. Amelia caught Michael's eye and saw the flicker of irritation there, though he kept his composure. The tension was palpable, hanging in the air like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Amelia could sense that this wasn't over, that something was building beneath the surface. She didn't know what it was, but she had a feeling that this flight would be anything but ordinary. And she was right. What happened next would not only change the course of their day but leave everyone on that tarmac, especially the smug pilot, reeling from a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. As Amelia shifted in her seat, she caught glimpses of the staff moving about the cabin, preparing for takeoff. Each member of the crew exuded professionalism, their smiles warm and polite. Yet, the tension she felt earlier hadn't left her. It lingered like an uninvited guest, threatening to tarnish what should have been a joyous occasion. Michael, always attuned to her feelings, leaned closer. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low enough to keep the conversation private. Amelia hesitated before answering. "It's nothing," she said, but her tone gave her away. "Just, moments like that pilot's behavior remind me how some people still see us." Michael frowned, his expression darkening. "He has no right to treat you like that, or anyone else for that matter." Amelia nodded but stayed quiet. She admired Michael's protective nature, but she didn't want this moment to be about the pilot. She wanted it to be about them, about celebrating their hard work and enjoying the luxury they had earned. Still, the memory of the pilot's smug smile was hard to shake. Moments later, the pilot re-entered the cabin, clipboard in hand. He made his way toward the cockpit, but not before his gaze flicked toward Amelia again. This time, there was no attempt to mask his disdain. His lips tightened, and his eyes narrowed, as if silently questioning her presence on this plane. Michael noticed the look and stood up. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying just enough authority to make the pilot stop in his tracks. The pilot turned, his expression guarded. "Yes, sir." Michael's stance was calm but firm. "Do you have a problem with my wife?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. For a moment, the pilot seemed caught off guard, but he quickly recovered. "Not at all," he said, his tone clipped. "I was simply ensuring that everything is in order." Michael didn't budge. "Good. Because I'd hate to think that a professional like yourself would allow personal biases to interfere with your duties." Amelia felt her chest tighten. Michael's words were measured, but they carried an unmistakable edge. She admired his restraint, knowing that he was holding back far more than he was saying. The pilot's jaw tightened, but he managed a stiff nod. "Of course not, sir. I'll ensure everything is prepared for a smooth flight." With that, he turned and disappeared into the cockpit. Michael sat back down, his eyes meeting Amelia's. "Let me know if he does anything else," he said quietly. Amelia smiled faintly. "Thank you. But let's not let him ruin our day." Michael reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "He won't. I promise." The engines roared to life, and the jet began to taxi down the runway. The hum of the plane's power filled the cabin, a reminder of the incredible luxury they were about to experience. Amelia closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to relax as the plane lifted off the ground. For a brief moment, she felt weightless, as though she could leave all her worries behind. But the peace didn't last long. Underscore 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 on. As the jet soared through the sky, the flight attendants began their rounds, offering refreshments and ensuring everyone was comfortable. Amelia accepted a glass of sparkling water and leaned back in her seat, trying to focus on the breathtaking view outside the window. The world below looked so small, so distant, as if all the troubles of everyday life were miles away. But her thoughts kept drifting back to the pilot. She wondered what had made him so quick to judge. Was it her appearance? Her skin color? The way she carried herself? Amelia had faced discrimination before, but it never got easier. Each time, it left a mark, a reminder of how far society still had to go. Michael, sensing her unease, leaned closer. "You know," he said, his voice warm and soothing, "people like him only have power if we let them get to us." Amelia smiled faintly. "I know. But it's hard to ignore sometimes." Michael nodded, his gaze steady. "Well, just remember his opinion means nothing. You've earned your place here just as much as anyone else. Probably more." Amelia appreciated his words, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter wasn't over. There was something about the pilot's demeanor, the way he carried himself, that unsettled her. It wasn't just arrogance, it was something deeper, something more insidious. Underscore 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 on. About an hour into the flight, Amelia decided to stretch her legs. She stood up and made her way toward the back of the cabin, where the restrooms were located. As she passed by the cockpit, she caught a snippet of conversation. The door was slightly ajar, and the pilot's voice drifted out. "Can't believe they let just anyone on these flights now," he was saying. His tone was low, but the disdain was unmistakable. Amelia froze, her heart pounding. She knew he was talking about her. She stood there for a moment, torn between confronting him and walking away. Before she could decide, the co-pilot's voice joined in. "Careful," the co-pilot said, his tone cautious. "You never know who might be listening." The pilot chuckled. "Oh, please. Like they'd do anything. People like that don't have real power, they just like to pretend they do." Amelia felt a surge of anger rise within her. She wanted to storm in there and demand an explanation, to make him face the consequences of his words. But she knew that wasn't the right move, not yet. Instead, she turned and walked back to her seat, her mind racing. When she returned, Michael looked up at her, his expression immediately concerned. "What's wrong?" Amelia hesitated, unsure if she should tell him what she had heard. But she knew Michael would want to know. "The pilot," she began, her voice low. "I overheard him talking. He said people like us don't have real power." Michael's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. "Did he now?" he said, his voice calm but laced with anger. Amelia nodded. "He doesn't think we belong here." Michael leaned back in his seat, his expression thoughtful. "Let's see about that," he said, his tone carrying a hint of determination. Underscore 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 on. The rest of the flight was uneventful on the surface, but beneath the calm exterior, tensions were simmering. Amelia could see it in Michael's posture, in the way he tapped his fingers on the armrest, in the way his gaze occasionally flicked toward the cockpit. He was planning something, she could feel it. When the jet finally began its descent, Amelia felt a mix of relief and apprehension. She was glad the flight was almost over, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Michael, for his part, seemed calm and composed, but Amelia knew him well enough to know that he was anything but. As the plane touched down and taxied to the private terminal, Amelia prepared to disembark. She stood up and gathered her belongings, trying to focus on the positive. They had arrived safely, and soon they would be on their way to their next adventure. But as she walked toward the exit, she noticed Michael lagging behind. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice low. Michael gave her a small smile. "Just tying up loose ends," he said cryptically. Amelia frowned, but before she could press him further, he turned and walked toward the cockpit. She watched as he approached the pilot, who was standing near the door, clipboard in hand. The pilot looked up, his expression neutral but guarded. Michael stopped in front of him and extended a hand. "I wanted to thank you for the flight," he said, his tone polite but firm. The pilot hesitated for a moment before shaking Michael's hand. "Of course, sir," he said, his voice stiff. Michael leaned in slightly, his gaze piercing. "And I wanted to let you know," he continued, his voice low enough that only the pilot could hear, "that I've already made a call. You'll be hearing from my team shortly." The pilot's eyes widened, his composure slipping for the first time. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice faltering. Michael smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You heard me," he said. "Consider this your notice." Amelia watched as the pilot's face turned pale, his confidence evaporating in an instant. She felt a sense of justice, a validation that the pilot's actions had not gone unnoticed or unpunished. Michael turned and walked back to Amelia, his expression calm and satisfied. "Shall we?" he said, offering her his arm. Amelia smiled, a newfound sense of pride and gratitude swelling in her chest. "Yes," she said. "Let's go." As they stepped off the plane and onto the tarmac, Amelia felt lighter than she had all day. She knew there would always be people like that pilot, people who judged others based on their own narrow-minded views. But she also knew there were people like Michael, who weren't afraid to stand up for what was right. And in that moment, she felt unstoppable. Amelia was used to being underestimated. It was a part of her life she had come to expect but never accept. She had learned to meet judgment with grace and assumptions with quiet strength. But today, as she walked toward the private jet with Michael by her side, she felt the weight of judgment more heavily than she had in a long time. The familiar sting was sharper, the condescension more blatant. The jet stood gleaming in the midday sun, a symbol of opulence and success. It was the kind of sight that usually filled Amelia with pride, a reminder of how far she and Michael had come. But as they approached, a figure stepped forward to intercept them, and Amelia's moment of joy dimmed. The pilot was tall and broad-shouldered, his uniform crisp and his demeanor commanding. His expression was unreadable at first glance, but there was something in the way he stood, the slight tilt of his chin, that made Amelia's instincts bristle. She tightened her grip on her purse, bracing herself for whatever was coming. "Excuse me, ma'am," the pilot said, his voice smooth but with a distinct edge. "Are you sure you're at the right aircraft?" Amelia stopped in her tracks, her gaze locking onto his. She didn't miss the way his eyes quickly assessed her, starting at her shoes, lingering on her tailored jacket, and finally settling on her face. There was no mistaking the condescension in his tone or the smirk that followed his words. Before she could respond, Michael, who had been a step ahead, turned back. His expression darkened as he caught the pilot's words. "Is there an issue?" Michael asked, his voice calm but carrying an undertone of authority that could silence a room. The pilot's smirk didn't waver. He glanced at Michael briefly but then returned his focus to Amelia, as if she were the one who needed to explain herself. "This is a private charter," the pilot said slowly, as though speaking to a child. "Not a public flight." Amelia raised an eyebrow, her patience wearing thin. She could feel Michael tense beside her, but she placed a hand on his arm, silently signaling for him to let her handle this. "We're quite aware of that," she said, her voice steady. "Thank you for the clarification." The pilot's smirk faltered for a brief moment, but he quickly recovered. Of course, he said, stepping aside just enough to let them pass, though the reluctance in his movement was unmistakable. Amelia and Michael exchanged a glance before continuing toward the stairs leading to the jet's entrance. But as they passed the pilot, Amelia heard him mutter under his breath, "You don't see this every day." Her steps faltered, and she turned sharply to face him. "Excuse me," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut through the tension. The pilot blinked, clearly not expecting her to respond. "I didn't mean anything by it," he said quickly, though the smirk tugging at his lips suggested otherwise. Amelia opened her mouth to retort, but Michael placed a hand on her shoulder, gently steering her toward the stairs. "Let it go," he said quietly, though the tightness in his jaw betrayed his own frustration. As they climbed the stairs, Amelia could feel the pilot's gaze burning into her back. She held her head high, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her affected. But inside, she was seething. Underscore 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 on. Once inside the jet, the contrast was stark. The interior was a sanctuary of luxury and comfort: plush leather seats, polished wood paneling, and soft ambient lighting that made the space feel warm and inviting. Amelia took a deep breath, letting the elegance of her surroundings ease some of the tension. But the pilot's words still echoed in her mind, a reminder that even here, in a world of privilege, she was not immune to prejudice. Michael settled into his seat across from her, his expression unreadable. Amelia could tell he was holding back, choosing his words carefully. "He had no right to speak to you like that," Michael said finally, his voice low but firm. Amelia nodded. "I know. But it's not worth it. People like him, they don't change." Michael leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Maybe not. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't face consequences." Amelia sighed, leaning back in her seat. "I just wanted today to be simple, you know. No drama, no reminders." Michael's gaze softened. "I understand," he said. "But you shouldn't have to ignore it just to keep the peace." Amelia nodded, but she stayed quiet. She knew Michael was right, but she also knew how exhausting it was to fight every battle. Sometimes, it was easier to let things go. Underscore 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 on. As the flight attendants moved through the cabin, offering refreshments and ensuring everything was in place, Amelia tried to push the encounter out of her mind. She sipped her water and gazed out the window, watching the world shrink below them as the jet ascended into the clouds. But the tension lingered, a silent passenger she couldn't ignore. About 30 minutes into the flight, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've reached our cruising altitude of 40,000 feet. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." Amelia couldn't help but notice the slight emphasis he placed on the word ladies, as though it were meant for her ears alone. She glanced at Michael, who met her gaze with a look of understanding. "It's not over," Michael said quietly. "What do you mean?" Michael leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "People like him, they don't stop at subtle comments. He'll find another way to make his point. Just wait." Amelia frowned but didn't argue. She had seen it happen before: the quiet escalation of microaggressions that built up until they couldn't be ignored. She hated that Michael was probably right. Underscore 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 on. As the flight continued, Amelia became increasingly aware of the pilot's presence. Though he remained in the cockpit for most of the journey, she could feel his disdain lingering in the atmosphere. It was in the way he occasionally glanced at her when he stepped into the cabin, the way his tone changed ever so slightly when addressing Michael versus herself. At one point, he made a show of adjusting a control panel near her seat, leaning over just enough to invade her personal space. "Everything okay here, ma'am?" he asked, his tone dripping with insincerity. "Yes, thank you," Amelia replied curtly, refusing to give him the reaction he was looking for. The pilot lingered for a moment longer than necessary before straightening and walking away. Amelia exhaled slowly, willing herself to stay calm. Underscore 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 on. Michael, however, was losing patience. He stood up and approached the flight attendant nearest to them. "Excuse me," he said politely but firmly. "I'd like to speak with the captain." The flight attendant hesitated, glancing nervously toward the cockpit. "Is there an issue, sir?" "There will be if I don't get a word with him," Michael replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. The flight attendant nodded quickly and disappeared into the cockpit. A few moments later, the pilot emerged, his expression carefully neutral. "Is there a problem, sir?" the pilot asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Yes," Michael said, crossing his arms. "I have a problem with the way you've been treating my wife." The pilot raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "I'm not sure I understand." "Don't," Michael interrupted. "Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. Your behavior has been unacceptable, and I won't tolerate it." Amelia watched the confrontation unfold, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure where this was going, but she knew Michael wouldn't back down. Underscore 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 on. The pilot's smirk returned, but this time it was strained. "I assure you, sir, I've treated all passengers with the utmost professionalism." Michael took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. "Professionalism isn't condescension. It isn't judgment. And it certainly isn't muttering under your breath about whether or not someone belongs here." The pilot's face paled slightly, and for the first time, Amelia saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. I didn't mean any offense," he said quickly. Michael's voice was calm but firm. "Offense or not, your actions have consequences. And I'll make sure you're held accountable." The pilot opened his mouth to respond but seemed to think better of it. He nodded stiffly and retreated to the cockpit, leaving Michael and Amelia standing in the cabin. Amelia reached for Michael's hand, squeezing it tightly. "Thank you," she said softly. Michael looked at her, his expression softening. "Always." The cabin was quiet, save for the faint hum of the engines, but the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Amelia leaned back in her seat, her thoughts swirling. Michael's confrontation with the pilot had been necessary, but it left her uneasy. She wasn't afraid, far from it, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of it. "Do you think he'll actually do anything?" she asked Michael, her voice low enough not to carry to the rest of the cabin. Michael glanced toward the cockpit door, his jaw tightening. "If he knows what's good for him, he won't." Amelia nodded, though her unease remained. She turned her gaze to the window, watching the endless expanse of clouds roll by. Normally, flights like this brought her a sense of peace, a chance to disconnect from the chaos of daily life. But today, the clouds felt like a barrier, trapping her in a space where she was forced to confront the ugliness of someone else's prejudice. underscore 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 on. The minutes dragged on, each one stretching longer than the last. Amelia tried to distract herself, flipping through a magazine and sipping from the glass of sparkling water a flight attendant had brought her. But her focus kept drifting back to the pilot, his smug expression etched into her memory. She glanced at Michael, who was typing furiously on his laptop. He looked calm on the surface, but Amelia knew him well enough to see the subtle signs of his anger, the way his fingers hit the keys with just a little too much force, the tight line of his mouth. "What are you doing?" she asked softly. Michael didn't look up. "Documenting everything," he replied. "Every word he said, every look he gave you. If this becomes a bigger issue, I want to make sure we have a record." Amelia felt a surge of gratitude for her husband's foresight. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael finally looked at her, his expression softening. "You don't have to thank me. No one should have to go through this, especially not you. Underscore 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 on. About an hour into the flight, the tension in the cabin took on a new form. The pilot's voice came over the intercom again, his tone professional but with a subtle edge that made Amelia's stomach churn. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be encountering some turbulence shortly. Please return to your seats and fasten your seat belts. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin." Amelia exchanged a glance with Michael. There had been no sign of turbulence on the horizon, and the jet's flight path had been clear when they boarded. She couldn't shake the feeling that the announcement was more than a routine update. The flight attendants moved quickly, securing loose items and ensuring all passengers were seated. Amelia noticed one of them glance toward the cockpit door with a look of unease, and her suspicion grew stronger. The turbulence came suddenly, jolting the plane with a force that made Amelia grip the armrests of her seat. Michael reached over, taking her hand in his. "It's probably nothing," he said, though the tightness in his voice betrayed his concern. Amelia nodded, but her heart was racing. She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that the pilot was trying to send a message. Underscore 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 on. As the turbulence subsided, the intercom crackled to life once more. "Apologies for the rough patch, folks," the pilot said. His tone was overly casual, almost mocking. "Seems we hit an unexpected pocket of air. Nothing to worry about." Amelia closed her eyes, willing herself to stay calm. She could feel the anger building inside her, a slow burn that threatened to boil over. Michael's grip on her hand tightened. "He's trying to get under your skin," he said quietly. "Don't let him win." Amelia opened her eyes and met his gaze. "I won't," she said firmly. Underscore 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 on. But the pilot wasn't finished. Over the next hour, he found subtle ways to assert his power. He adjusted the cabin temperature without warning, making it uncomfortably cold for a while before switching to an almost stifling warmth. He made announcements that were unnecessary and vaguely condescending, each one dripping with a false politeness that made Amelia's skin crawl. By the time the jet began its descent, Amelia was more than ready for the flight to be over. But as they prepared to land, the pilot delivered one final insult. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly. For those of you unfamiliar with our procedures, please ensure your seat belts are fastened and your belongings are secure." We wouldn't want any surprises, now, would we? Amelia's blood boiled. The insinuation was clear, and she could feel the eyes of the other passengers on her. She clenched her fists, willing herself to stay calm. Michael, however, had reached his limit. He stood up, ignoring the flight attendant's protests, and marched to the cockpit door. Underscore 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 on. What do you think you're doing? Michael demanded as he confronted the pilot. The pilot turned to face him, his smirk firmly in place. Just doing my job, sir, he replied smoothly. Michael took a step closer, his voice low and dangerous. Your job is to fly this plane, not to belittle and harass my wife. If you think I'm going to let you get away with this, you're sorely mistaken. The pilot's smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, though his tone lacked its earlier confidence. Michael leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. You will regret this, he said. I promise you that. With that, he turned and walked back to his seat, leaving the pilot visibly shaken. Underscore 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 on. As the jet landed and taxied to the terminal, Amelia felt a mix of relief and anticipation. She knew Michael well enough to know that he wasn't bluffing. The pilot had made a grave mistake, and he was about to face the consequences. As they disembarked, the pilot avoided their gaze, his earlier arrogance replaced by a nervous tension. Amelia couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Justice was coming, and this time, it would be swift and undeniable. Michael held his ground, his posture unwavering. The weight of his presence was enough to make anyone pause, but the pilot seemed determined to push his luck. Look, sir, the pilot began, his tone dripping with a forced politeness that barely masked his disdain, it's not personal. There are just protocols we need to follow, and sometimes, misunderstandings happen. Surely, you can see that. Michael's gaze didn't waver. Misunderstandings, he repeated, his voice low but carrying a sharp edge. Let me make one thing perfectly clear, my wife and I are not here to entertain your prejudices or excuses. You will do your job, and you will do it professionally. The pilot stiffened, his smirk faltering for the first time. Amelia stood silently beside Michael, her hands clasped in front of her. She could feel the tension radiating off her husband, and while she admired his restraint, she knew his patience was wearing thin. Underscore 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 on. As they finally boarded the jet, the atmosphere remained charged. The luxurious interior was a stark contrast to the simmering conflict. The plush leather seats and polished wood accents seemed to mock the hostility that had unfolded just moments before. Amelia settled into her seat, her movements measured. She was determined not to let the pilot's behavior rattle her, but the memory of his condescending glance lingered in her mind. Michael sat beside her, his jaw tight. He was typing furiously on his phone, and Amelia didn't need to ask to know he was already taking steps to address the situation. You're making notes, aren't you? She asked quietly. Michael glanced at her, his expression softening slightly. Always, he replied. People like him think they can get away with this because no one holds them accountable. That changes today. Underscore 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 on. The flight began smoothly, but the tension in the air was palpable. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, delivering the usual pre-flight announcements. But to Amelia, his tone felt calculated, as if every word was chosen to remind her of his supposed superiority.